So let's talk real briefly about some interesting amides. Urea. Urea is a very small amide. It's actually a diamide because we've got two amine groups here. This is naturally occurring. In solid form, it's a white solid and it's water soluble. It is produced in your body from carbon dioxide and ammonia. So your body metabolizes proteins and fats and carbohydrates. And proteins contain nitrogen. And sometimes your body has too much nitrogen and needs to get rid of it. And it does so by converting the excess nitrogen to urea, and then that gets removed in your urine. So your kidneys take it out of your blood, and it is excreted via the urine. Now, if your kidneys are not working properly, then you can get high levels of urea in your system, and then you've got a problem called uremia, and that's not good. Melatonin is another amide. This is a polyfunctional amide. So here in pink we have the amide functionality, but over here, what's this guy? That's a cyclic amine. And then over here, what's this? That's an ether. And then here we have an aromatic ring as well. So we got lots of functional groups going on. Melatonin is a hormone. It's made in your pineal gland, and it regulates the sleep-wake cycle in humans. So your melatonin levels rise and fall during the day, and this helps us to know when it's time to sleep and when it's time to be awake. And of course, sometimes we get a little mixed up. If you travel across many time zones, you get what's called jet lag, where your body is in one time zone when your hormones are in another time zone, and it's very hard to sleep, even if you're tired, because your body thinks it's the middle of the day, even if it's the middle of the night. Melatonin levels also vary with age. Young children have much higher levels of melatonin than older people do, and that's why senior citizens often have a hard time sleeping. They just don't have enough melatonin, so they don't sleep very well. Acetaminophen is an amide. So here we see the amide group right there. And it is a variation of acetamide. So it's got a phenol group on the acetamide. So its name is N-acetyl-para-aminophenol. That's just, if you're at all interested. Acetaminophen is a top-selling over-the-counter pain reliever. It's pretty good at relieving pain, and it does so with less stomach irritation because there's no carboxylic acid group on it. So that's good. But it does nothing for inflammation. The advantage that aspirin and ibuprofen have are that they also combat inflammation. And so if you've got something like arthritis where much of your pain is from the inflammation, the acetaminophen might help a little bit with the pain, but because it's doing nothing for the inflammation, it's not really going to benefit. Large doses, and by large, they don't mean that much above therapeutic doses, can cause liver and kidney damage. So I'll tell you a little story. I have 6 kids. Okay, so when the 4th one was born, the 3rd one was 2 years old. And I was working on something for someone else, and I thought they were watching the 2-year-old, and they were not. And he got into a brand new bottle of Target brand acetaminophen, still in the box. So I come out there, and the person who's supposed to be watching him is just sitting over somewhere else, not paying attention at all. And he's in the kitchen playing with acetaminophen tablets on the floor. And I'm like, oh no. And the worst thing is, he had a fever, and so I had already given him a dose of children's Tylenol. So he was already dosed. So I'm like, okay, we don't need to panic here. He had opened the box, taken off the shrink wrap, gotten the childproof lid off, and opened the seal and pulled out the cotton. These are the sorts of children I have. And then, they're bright red and yellow, little pills, they're all over the floor. And I'm like, well, this is okay because this is a brand new bottle. I will just count all the pills and then I'll know. I didn't think he had eaten any, but I couldn't tell. So I counted them all up. The package says 100. There were 104. Right? Well, thank you for being generous. You're not, But how do I know there weren't 106? Right? And since he already had a dose, and I tried getting them wet, because some pills, if you get them wet, they'll leave smudgy stuff all over. And I thought, well, if that happens, then his face is clean, then he probably didn't eat any of them. But they were impervious to that. I'm like, great. So I have to call poison control. So I called poison control. And I learned a lot about acetaminophen. So acetaminophen overdose has no immediate symptoms until about 48 hours later, when your liver starts malfunctioning because it's been damaged by the acetaminophen. At that point, there's really nothing they can do for you. So they said, yes, you really do need to take him to the emergency room. I said, what are they going to do? Are they going to pump his stomach? I said, no. We'll test his blood to see what his levels are, and if he has had too much, then there's an antidote that we can give it. I'm like, oh, okay, that doesn't sound too traumatic, because I was like 99% sure he hadn't eaten any of them, but there's just that little uncertainty. So off to the emergency room we go, and they test his blood, and yeah, he had Tylenol in him, acetaminophen in him, but it was the right level. He hadn't eaten any extras. So, phew. Okay, so after that, I did not buy Tylenol anymore. So fast forward 2 years, now that 2-month-old baby is a 2-year-old, and he got into the children's bottle of ibuprofen suspension. And I know he drank some of it. It tastes pretty good. So I'm like, oh, great. Well, it's been 2 years. Hopefully they're not going to come visit me now. So I called poison control again. And, they want to know how much the child weighs and how much of the bottle is left and what the concentration is and everything. And they said, okay, just a minute, we need to do a little calculation. And they come back and they said, well, the good news is he could drink the whole bottle and he would have no permanent effects. They said now if he had, a fair amount, he might get an upset stomach, he might vomit, but he's going to be just fine. And I'm like, okay, that just seals it right there. No more acetaminophen in my house, right? And you've probably heard stories on the news about people who accidentally gave their children too much acetaminophen because you get these cold preparations that it's in with other things, and then you give them the Tylenol also, or even just a miscommunication with the parents. Even just a double dose of acetaminophen can be really bad for a child. So that's my little soapbox. Ibuprofen is much, much safer. Much safer. Anyway, so there's acetaminophen. DEET. You've probably heard of DEET. It's an insect repellent and a very effective one. Its chemical name is N,N-diethyl metatoluamide. Toluamide? I'm not sure exactly how to pronounce that. But you can see why they call it DEET, because that's easier. Common insect repellent. And the way this works, it's a repellent. It doesn't kill insects. The way it does is it messes with their olfactory organs, their sense of smell, and basically makes you invisible to them because they can't smell that you're there. They go seek out creatures with blood because of smell. And so they can't smell you, and so therefore they don't come and bite you. But this is, if you're interested, there's the structure of DEET.